For those of you who don't know me, I've been working on the Cedar series since 2015. And as Joan said, it's a series of dystopian sci-fi novels. The Cedar series is about the people of planet Coda who are attempting to survive an irreversible, self-inflicted environmental crisis. In order for the Codan species to survive, they created the Cedar program, which explored the universe for a habitable planet for their relocation. When the program was unsuccessful, it was canceled for the Dome Project, which built domes over the most populated cities in 9 regions. Coda is ruled by the Global Assembly, an authoritarian government supported by the ultra-wealthy and headed by the leader. Reading from any book in a series is difficult because you don't want to avoid spoilers. You want to avoid spoilers. I'm going to read from the second book in the series, Foreseeable Future, which I didn't get to read from because of the pandemic. And here are details which will help make sense of what I'm about to read without the spoilers, hopefully. Jorlik Vanderlord is a pivotal character in the series. He was director of the Cedar program, and he was gone from Coda for over a century in his spaceship when all else fails. In the time he was gone, he became a Codan legend, and nursery rhymes written about him. When he returned from outer space, he denied finding a habitable world, but after he died, his great-grandson Yor made it his life's mission to discover the truth about his great-grandfather's journey. Yor's mother is Mar, and his stepfather is Razor Jeps. In the first book, at a global event called the Breeze Celebration, Yor attempts to reveal the truth about his great-grandfather to the displeasure of the Global Assembly, and he escapes being arrested because his stepfather Razor tackles the pursuer. Leading up to the story I'm about to read, Razor is now in jail, and his best friend, Lek Valstead, has visited him in prison. Lek is an analyst for the GS, or the Global Security Service, a KGB-like organization, and he is torn over his friend's imprisonment. This chapter is about Lek's relationship with Razor and how he is going to deal with this personal crisis. One more thing to know for later in the story: the movement is the active resistance against the government. Units are money. Shambans are the scapegoat for the Global Assembly, are blamed for the Codan people's problems, and Malrap is an intoxicating beverage. When Lek returned from visiting Razor, he switched his office's active glass to opaque. He decided to drop his professional facade for a few moments, unplug the vidcam in the upper right-hand corner of his office ceiling, and succumb to his sad and frustrated mood. He opened his viewer. On the screen, a vid was paused of Razor tackling the woman at Breeze Celebration. Before visiting Razor, Lek had watched the vid a few times. He understood Razor's intention when he performed this act in front of the entire planet, and even respected him for it. But now his friend's execution was a foregone conclusion. He could do some small things for Razor without pushing the boundaries and endangering himself and his family. For instance, during Lek's visit to Razor, he turned away from the vidcams when he told Razor about Yor and Mar, ensuring that the movement of his lips wouldn't be recorded. There was a knock at his door, and somebody attempted to open it. Director Red Thuda, Lek's superior, said through the door, "Lek, you have a visitor. Why is your door locked?" He had no idea he'd locked it, but he closed the vid, shut his viewer, reconnected the vidcam, and unlocked the door. When he opened it, there stood Director Thuda with the leader, flanked by guards. Behind them, all of Lek's co-workers were standing at attention in their cubicles. Lek stepped aside. Thuda and the leader entered his office with a guard who closed the door and told Lek to move further into the room. The leader sat behind Lek's desk, adjusting the seat and pushing himself in. He examined the objects on the desktop and activated the framed 20-second digivid of Lek's baby daughter in her high chair singing the nursery rhyme, "When All Else Fails." The leader forced a smile. "They're so innocent at that age," he said, pausing the digivid. Then he looked up at Lek. "Director said you had a discussion with Razor Jeps." "Yes, sir," Lek said. "I haven't had time to write a report." "Tend to the bureaucracy later, soldier, and tell me what he said." Lek glanced over at Director Thuda, a towering and imposing man who rose to the ranks of the military, special tactics officer with the Global Guard. It wasn't normal procedure to just discuss an interrogation before a debriefing and a report. Thuda usually did things by the letter. Don't stand on ceremony, Valstead, Thuda said. This is special circumstances. The leader asked you a question. Lex said, he told me nothing of importance. I talked to him myself, the leader said. He seems unrepentant, wouldn't you agree? Lex said, yes, sir. Thuda looked concerned at Lex's uninformative responses to the leader's questions and said to the leader, as I told you earlier, Valstead is an old friend of Razor Jeff's, sir. But that in mind, I thought he might have luck getting Jeff to speak without utilizing more vigorous means. If Valstead's sympathies are getting in the way, then I'll take him off the case. That's right, the leader said. You said something about their relationship over the comm. Yes, sir, Thuda said. But you're a busy man. It's understandable you forgot. I didn't forget. I have an unbelievable memory. I simply thought you'd handle it, the leader said. Do I need to find someone else to do your job, Thuda? Thuda snapped to attention, clicking his heels together. Sorry, sir, I didn't mean... Doesn't matter, Thuda, the leader said. Jeps is the kind of man who'd spill more information with a lighter touch. Since Valstead's his old friend, he might have a chance at getting Jeps to open up. Thuda said, brilliant idea, sir. The leader said, I shouldn't get this job for being good-looking. Then he laughed. Thuda forced a laugh in response and looked over at Lek, who laughed as well. The leader continued, do you think you can get him to reveal any of Valstead's deeper connections in the movement, Do you think you can get him to reveal any of Vanderlord's deeper connections to the movement, Valstead? If Director Thuda will allow me, Lex said, I'll take another crack at him. I think that's best, the leader said. So of course we'll allow it, won't we, Thuda? Absolutely, sir. So then we're all in agreement, the leader said, standing up and patting Thuda's shoulder as he passed him. Keep up the good work, the both of you. I'll check back soon. Thuda exited the office behind the leader and his guard. Lex sat down and readjusted his chair. He picked up the digivid of his daughter taken years ago. There was a more current photo on the desk of himself, his partner Lenara, and their 6-year-old daughter Ara on an outing in Milo Park. He kept the vid and the photo on his desk to remind him why he performed this job, even though over the past few years he developed reservations about GSS tactics. There was a knock at the door. Director Thuda entered, closed the door firmly behind him, and marched up to Lex's desk. So that was exciting, Thuda said. We've never had a visit from the leader before. I thought you were friends. Friends, more like acquaintances. We travel in different circles. I see him at departmental meetings and functions sometimes. Lek recalled how Thuda constantly bragged about knowing the leader personally. Seems like he's taken an interest in the case. Can you blame him, Thuda said, then peered over his shoulder to the vidcam in the upper right-hand corner of the ceiling. He walked over to the cam and unplugged it. Between you and me, your Vanderlord made a fool out of the leader in front of the entire planet. He's got a long way to go to save face. Oh, I don't think he really cares. He just wants to figure out this conspiracy. Conspiracy? Yes, that's what he said to me before he left. Let's find out who else is behind this conspiracy, Thuda said. So you need to work on Jeps before he's passed to another department. This could be a big win for us. It'll lead to an increase in our budget. We're analysts, not interrogators. I know, this is new territory, but I'm counting on you to break Jeps. I have faith in you. It could even mean a promotion for both of us. I know you're friends with Jeps, but for the good of the globe, right? Yes, sir, Lex said, for the good of the globe. Director Thuda plugged in the vidcam and exited the office, then ducked back inside. Clear your windows, Valstead. You don't want your subordinates to think you're hiding something. Will do, sir, Lex said, and Thuda exited again. Lex placed the digivid back in its place on his desk and contemplated his next interrogation of Razor. He doubted Razor knew anything at all about your seditious activities. He cared about his mother and Razor and was too smart to implicate them in his plot. When Lex inevitably got nothing, Razor would be passed on to interrogators who would use severe tactics, which would still lead to no new intelligence. Lex needed to figure out how to slow this potential chain of events. He and Razor had always been there for one another. They met as lower classmen in the dorms at Royal University, then moved into an apartment together as roommates the next year. The apartment was dank, dark, and moldy, and had its issues with vermin and insects, but it was their place to bring back women and throw parties while they labored through their studies. Razier was a city dweller. He grew up in the small city of Avon, about 140 kilometers from Capital City. Lech was from the small town of Rapid Springs, which was thousands of kilometers away. His parents were ranchers and Global Assembly loyalists. Even as the environmental crisis accelerated and the value of the ranch declined and the farm subsidies dried up, as government funds were funneled toward research and development for the Dome Project, his parents remained steadfast in their fealty. They attempted to instead instill the same allegiance into Lech, although they encouraged him to pursue his education and focus on a different kind of career as they saw the future of their ranch in jeopardy. During his time at university, Razier's parents perished in a high mortality weather incident brought on by the crisis, which pummeled Avon with 300-kilometer-per-hour winds, destroying their home with no warning. After the funeral, before they returned to university, Lech had the idea for a trip to help Razier over his grief. So they hit the road to Lech's parents' ranch. They drove in Lech's two-seat vehicle through the afternoon, the evening, and into the next day, alternating driving while the others slept. The only real hazard was the heat. They had to pass through the Zambar Plains, which was experiencing a record-setting heat wave. Lech was unnerved. He worried his vehicle would overheat, and rest stops with water only occurred every 150 kilometers on the plains. To avoid a breakdown, Lech turned off his vehicle's interior cooling system and rolled down the windows, exposing them to a blast furnace-like breeze for the majority of the trip. Razier had never experienced the wide open spaces where there was no sign of civilization for hundreds of kilometers at a time. He had never seen the spectacular Fell Mountain range and its beautiful vistas at the highest altitudes along the road. As the kilometers passed, Razier's dark, morose mood gave way to his characteristic, funny, inquisitive persona. When they arrived at Lech's parents' house, Lech's mother was aware of Razier's loss and wanted to do everything she could do to lift his spirits. She set up a cot for Razier in Lech's childhood bedroom. Razier kidded Lech about when all else fails wallpaper and the posters of his favorite childhood bands tacked up around the room. Lech took it in stride since he was happy that Razier was reverting to his old self. Lech's father welcomed Razier to his home, but didn't say another word to him after that. He didn't understand why his son would spend precious units and drive all the way home to make his friend feel better. He thought Razier should get over his loss like a man and move on with his life. During the visit, Lech drove Razier to a few of his favorite childhood haunts around town. They hiked to a peak where he and his secondary school friends had built a herder monument with rocks, and he and Razier added a few stones of their own. They went to a Malrap pub where Lech first got drunk, and the few childhood friends who still lived in town met them there. Lech was delighted to see Razier connecting with his friends and loosening up on Malrap, but he noticed the locals giving Razier dirty looks. Most of the regulars had lost their ranching jobs or had been laid off when the local resources were exhausted and the global mining consortiums moved on. Lech was at the bar buying another round when he was confronted by one of them. "Who's your friend?" an old acquaintance of Lech's father asked. He stank of Malrap and body odor. He was a veteran of the separatist revolts and a miner who hadn't been employed in a long time. Lech said, "Friend from university." "We don't appreciate his kind around here," the man said, and turned to the other people at the bar. "Do we, fellas?" The men at the bar didn't look up from their drinks. "He's no threat to you," Lech said. "Why don't I buy you a Malrap?" "I'll take you up on it, Lech, but you should know better than bring his kind around here." "Whatever you say," Lech said. He bought the man a shot of Malrap and was carrying a full tray of drinks to his table when the man called out to him, Don't think because you're at that fancy university that you know better than your elders." Then the man tossed back his shot and added, "I thought your parents taught you better, but those big city folks must have tainted your morals." "You have a good day too," Lech said, and returned to Razier and his friends. Lech decided to stay sober and didn't drink anymore. Afterward, he and Razier drove up to a cliff overlooking the town. They sat at the edge in silence as the blood-red sun descended into the horizon. The landscape below was soon shrouded in inky black darkness, except for the smattering of lights on the horizon from the drilling rig still operating, and a few street lamps lit as the town attempted to conserve energy. The temperature dropped, coming close to tolerable. Rager said, "You know, I appreciate this, Lek." "No problem," Lek said. "I know you do the same for me." "Yeah, probably," Rager said and laughed. Lek laughed too and said, "Just do one thing for me. I knew you grew it in mourning for your parents, but shave off that ridiculous beard when we get back to university." Rager stroked his beard a few times and pulled on the hairs coming out of the chin. "You don't think it's sexy? You don't see the women flocking to its charms?" At one point in CODIS history, beards were considered attractive, but in the past 50 years, they've become associated with the worst elements of CODIS society, especially the overgrown kind like Rager's. "If you actually trimmed it, but knowing you, I don't see that happening," Lek said. "Maybe when we get back, you can find another way to keep your parents in mind." "Maybe you're right. You're always looking out for me," Rager said. "You're a good friend." As the visit was coming to an end, Lek found it difficult to ignore his father's annoying behavior. He scowled at Lek in passing and mumbled incoherently under his breath in response to questions. His father wasn't much for communication, but this was bizarre even for him. When Lek asked his mother what was bothering his father and why he'd been scarce around the house during his visit, she said, "Your father has his hands full with the ranch right now." "Feels like more than that," Lek said. "If you want to know what's on his mind, then ask him. You're so much like him sometimes," Lek's mother said. "You may get an answer, you might not. You might get an answer you don't want to hear." Lek waited until his mother said goodnight and Rager was asleep. He found his father sitting on the porch in a wooden chair, puffing on his pipe, gazing off into the darkness. He was listening for any disturbance of the livestock by predators. The porch reeked of burned tobacco mixed with his father's his scent of rich soil and sweat. Lek sat down in the wooden chair next to him and said, "So?" His father removed his pipe from his mouth, blew out smoke, then banged the pipe's ash out on the chair's armrest and swept it away with the back of his hands. His father said, packing the pipe from a pouch on his lap. "Well, it gets us as good a place to start as any," Lek said. "I guess," his father said. A liquid fuel lamp burning on the table beside his father didn't give off much light, but Lek could see how his father appeared and how he was becoming an old man. Lek hadn't noticed the years showing on him this much before. His father had deep creases in his face and gray hair shooting out from his wide-brimmed, sweat-stained hat. Lek said, "We haven't spoken much since I've been here, since I've been home. I don't have time to play around like you. I'm on vacation." "Vacation?" Lek's father said. "You know how many times I've had vacation in the past 20 years? "None, except for the time we drove to the capital city for my orientation at the university." "Exactly. I did come here to visit you and Mother, so I wouldn't call it a vacation." "Call it what you like," Lek's father said, "but you haven't been working here." "You haven't asked." "Do I have to ask my only son to help out on the ranch that feeds his father and mother?" "I'm sorry. You're right. I hadn't thought about it that way." "See, that's the problem," Lek's father said, turning and pointing at him with his pipe. "For an intelligent young man who's doing so well at university and aims to make the Global Assembly proud with his service, you don't think too clearly sometimes." "I simply thought..." "No, like I said, you weren't thinking," Lek's father said, standing up and leaning over Lek, still pointing at him with the pipe. He raised his voice, saying, "You come here like some dignitary, with your mother waiting on you hand and foot. You know damn well I need help around here. Back in the day after school when you lived here, you seemed to want to help. But now that you've gone off to the city and your mind is filled with highfalutin ideas, shoveling shit is beneath you." Lek's father stood there silent, breathing heavy. Lek smelled the malwrap on his breath. His father was never much of a drinker. He wobbled on his feet, then sat back down. "I'm sorry, Pops." "Sorry?" Lek's father said inside. "Everyone's sorry. Your mother, the university who cut the global assembly who cut subsidies, the banks who don't want to lend me units." I didn't know about that. And why would you? Your mother doesn't know, Lek's father sighed again. And then to top it off, you bring that shaman scum here with you. Shaman scum? Yes, your buddy. I thought I raised you better than that. Razier isn't shaman. Maybe a distant aunt. His father was not amused and gave Lek a stern look. You think that's funny? Lek said, the economic problems and the fact your ranch is barely functional are caused by an environmental crisis spiraling out of control. What do the predators coming down from the mountains and slaughtering your livestock, with the fact that there's no more grazing land, have to do with Shamba? The predators and the grazing problems are just part of the natural environmental cycle, Lek's father said. And I can't get no loans to keep this place running because the Global Assembly has spent so many units on those damn revolts and containing shaman terrorism. Lek said, you must be watching some crazy viewing channel. The reason you can't get a loan is because this ranch is a lousy investment and your lifestyle will be erased in the next 5 to 10 years by the crisis. The Global Assembly is investing their funds in the Dome Project, not doomed agricultural ventures. You're being brainwashed by your shaman pal. No, I'm stating fact, not propaganda. Lek's father jumped up from his chair and began yelling at Lek. I want that shaman scum out of my house at dawn. Do you hear me? I won't have him in my house no more. Then I'll leave as well. So be it, Lek's father said. If you're going to side with that shaman scum over your family, then you're no son of mine. You shouldn't come back here or communicate with us anymore. What are you saying? You heard me. Now get out of my sight. Get going. Get. Lek stood and entered the house. On the other side of the doorway, his mother was waiting. She embraced him. That was the last time he saw his parents in person, although he and his mother continued communicating without his father knowing. When the domes were sealed, his parents were left on the outside, and he never heard from them again. Lek opened his viewer and re-watched the scene of Razier running down the ramp toward the woman. He watched it in slow motion so he could observe the determined look pasted on his friend's face as he lunged at the woman and tackled her off the ramp. Lek said, "You idiot. You beautiful idiot." Lek closed the vid and shut his viewer, then thought of something he might be able to do to help his friend.